Development of the ERCOT electricity market, history and crisis. Introducing ERCOT. ERCOT stands for the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. It was founded in 1970 to replace Texas Interconnected Systems. It's a nonprofit independent system operator, the first in the United States, and it works with the Texas Reliability Entity. Texas Interconnected Systems was formed during World War II when several utilities decided to unify to support the war effort. At this time, the grid was quite fragmented. As utilities recognized benefits of interconnection, TIS remained after the war. ERCOT operates an electric grid with 74,800 kilometers of transmission lines, 610 different generators, and 25 million customers. It covers about 90% of the state. Some municipalities do have vertically integrated utilities and are separate from the ERCOT organization. It is not regulated by the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission because it does not have any synchronous connections to the major U.S. interconnections. It does actually have some interconnections, but those are asynchronous direct current, and those are to the Southwest Power Pool and Mexico's Federal Electricity Commission. Early years. So in 1995, the Texas legislature amended the Public Regulatory Act, allowing the creation of a wholesale market. In 1999, a bill was passed to allow consumers to choose their retail electric providers. The wholesale market was actually launched in June 2001, and the retail market was open to competition January 2002. ERCOT had about 10 control areas before the unified market. The market launched with 4 zones, and in the first year of operations, interzonal congestion costs reached over $100 million US. This was initially solved with interzonal congestion cost direct assignment, which is where producers purchased a financial right to the congested path for a particular time. It's essentially just a financial hedge like we discussed in class against congested lines. So in July 2002, what with all of the inefficiencies that were clearly developing in the market, they started to try and figure out how to reorganize the market. So in September 2003, it was declared they would have developed a nodal market by October 2006. However, it actually took until 2010, and the total cost was about $550 million, which is significantly over budget. However, savings for customers were estimated at about $5.6 billion for the next 10 years. And the prices at a per megawatt hour level are reduced around 2%, give or take. Nodal market structures at ERCOT. The main structures are congestion revenue right, which is a type of hedge that allows people who purchase this to be compensated for congested transmission lines. And these are based on the difference between locational marginal price between the source of the power and its sink, wherever the power is moving towards. There is also a day-ahead market. This is pretty straightforward. It's a voluntary forward energy market that maximizes bid-based revenues minus offer-based costs. Super simple, just like we discussed in class. The next structure is a reliability unit commitment, which ensures the availability of resources to meet forecasted load. It uses something called a make-whole payment to compensate committed resources. So essentially whatever people did not receive that they would have if they were operating normally, they receive the market price for the amount of generation capacity they committed. It runs both a day-ahead and an hourly calculation. Day-ahead is much the same as the day-ahead market. Hourly is run as more of a fine-tuning instrument, and it actually only runs for hours that have been already evaluated by the day-ahead reliability unit market. Then there is also a real-time energy market, which has security-constrained economic dispatch every 5 minutes. And that is, again, the typical economic dispatch as was discussed in lecture, making sure the full available capacity is being used to least cost using the available energy offer curves. There's also a load frequency control mechanism that dispatches resources only based on real-time data and the resource limits calculator. It does not take any economics into account. It just operates to maintain the grid frequency. So Texas has done some interesting things in trying to integrate renewable power. It produced about 21% of its electricity from wind in 2020. And it has 33,133 megawatts of wind power, as well as around 12,000 megawatts of solar. And the effective management and transmission of renewable energy is enabled by these structures called competitive renewable energy zones. These essentially enabled the transport of renewable power from the very rural, sparsely populated plains where wind power is produced to the population centers. The CRES project invested about $7 billion in 5,600 kilometers of new transmission lines, and they were about 1/4 of the new high-voltage transmission lines built in the U.S. in the last 10 years. Wind curtailment, the amount of wind power that had to be prevented from operation, dropped from 17% to 1.2% by the end of the project. So that's a huge increase in efficiency. Now, on to crisis. In 2021, there was a major winter storm that caused significant power outages. It actually brought the coldest temperatures Texas had seen in several decades. Because of a lack of preparedness for cold weather, nearly 1,800 units at over 350 plants failed. Natural gas wells were also disabled due to cold temperatures and lack of winterization. And because so much of Texas's energy is dependent on natural gas plants, the sudden loss this was a significant problem. The sudden loss in capacity required immediate and significant load shedding to prevent a catastrophic failure and eventual black start of the grid. So as you can see in the diagram, as there was a enormous drop in capacity in online power that caused the frequency to drop really, really fast, and if the frequency had remained below the line on the screen for 9 minutes, the grid would have had an emergency shutdown that would have forced the grid to have a black start that would have taken months to accomplish. So they aggressively shed load, but there was a pretty significant problem because ERCOT does not have any price caps, and I will explain what this has to do with the winter storm once I finish this section. So, price caps were increased after the nodal market was introduced. ERCOT does not operate any markets more than a day in advance. Instead, they have a price cap which rose after the nodal market was implemented. The offer cap was about $4,500 in October 2012, $5,000 in June 2013, $7,000 in June 2014, and $9,000 by June 2015, and it remains level to this day. Now, they had to do this because ERCOT does not operate any markets more than a day in advance. They also don't have a minimum reserve margin. Profits are very unevenly distributed throughout the year. When prices are at peak, a generator that normally makes maybe 40,000 over 2 days could make over 10 million. A generator that is not able to produce will face losses in the millions as well. So this is the way that they motivate generation or investment. However, ERCOT actually only has about 16% of operating reserve at any given time, which is about half the rate of states that have capacity markets instead. So their effectiveness is a touch questionable, but they choose to use the somewhat more free market approach, which is much in line with Texas philosophy and attitudes. So the problem with the price caps is that during the winter storm, the prices remained at the cap of $9,000 per megawatt for 87.5 hours, when the previous record was only about 16.75 hours. ERCOT actually maintained prices at the cap much longer than was necessary. There was meant to be a circuit breaker mechanism where if a generator reached a certain megawatt year value, the maximum price would change to either $2,000 per megawatt hour or 50 times the natural gas price, whichever was higher. The problem is the system was designed for hot summer conditions and not winter freezes, and because of the natural gas scarcity, the circuit breaker price would have been above $18,000. Some electricity producers in ERCOT, notably Griddy Energy, allowed consumers to purchase power directly from the wholesale market, which was experiencing this absolutely massive spike. Although Griddy did warn its customers to switch providers before prices rose, only about 2/3 did, and those that did not switch faced bills in the hundreds or thousands of dollars for those 2 days. Now, because the crisis happened over a weekend, some retail producers were closed and customers were not able to switch providers. Concerns about future crises and customer well-being caused the Texas legislature to pass a bill forbidding distributors to offer wholesale prices to retail consumers. Now, there are several proposals to more effectively invest in and manage the Texas electric grid. An event-specific circuit breaker price of $2,000 whenever a significant portion of the market is unable to respond to pricing incentives is one way to manage high prices over long periods of time when there's a major outage. Another big proposal is mandatory weatherization. Obviously, that would have helped a heck of a lot. Investments in energy efficiency, especially insulation, and especially for people who are possibly there would be government help to help people who are poorer and cannot afford to effectively insulate their homes on their own. Perhaps there is also a possibility to implement demand response programs for the residential sector to complement those available to commercial and industrial customers. In Texas, residential customers actually consume more energy, especially because of the really high air conditioning requirements in the summer. Another option is to increase construction of DC lines to other grids so they could import power more effectively, or they could make some compromises, maybe commit to certain reliability upgrades and interconnections with the larger power grid in exchange for the federal regulatory commission promising to not force them to implement a capacity market or any other major overhauls. All right.